Hi, I'm Jeff Bobbin, the pastor of 3 small churches. Some of you may have seen my earlier video on social distancing. Today I want to talk to you about some of the other conversations that are taking place within the leadership of our churches. The churches are the people, not our buildings, and we need to be reminded of that from time to time. And the leaders in the church, I'm pretty happy to say, have been having conversations in most of our churches about how to safely return to gather again as the church. We want to be a model for our community on what we ought to be thinking about now. We're not pointing the finger at anybody else or looking for anybody else to solve our problems. We're looking for ways to take care of the people that gather as the church. We're discussing what we can do. How can we make a difference in the way that we take care of folks in our churches? We know that we're going to have to make changes. Some of those changes are temporary, we hope, and others might need to be permanent. But whether they're temporary or permanent really doesn't matter. We know that we need to make some changes before we can invite people to gather back together again. Our goal is that we're able to gather as safe as possible. Let's talk for a few minutes about some of the things we need to be thinking about what we need to do. We're definitely going to have to continue to worry about social distancing, as I talked about earlier. But we're also going to have to be having the conversations that I and many church leaders are having about disinfecting buildings, rooms, restrooms. What does that mean, and how do we have to do it? Who's going to do it? Those are questions that we need to be addressing now. Any space that we're going to gather in, we have to take that into consideration. But it's not just our sanctuaries and our other gathering spaces. It's some of those spaces that it's important we have a conversation about what are we going to do with the restrooms? What about office space that people can be in and out of? Each of us has many things we should be having conversations about. Are we going to use masks? Are we going to require people that come into our building to have a mask on? The other day I took my wife into town to have some blood work done, and she wanted to stop at a store in town. And so I pulled up in front and dropped her off, left her out. And as I sat in the car, I watched somebody get out of the car and go up to the storefront, and they weren't wearing a mask of any kind. And when they got to the door, they were turned away. And I could tell they were not happy, but they were told without a mask they couldn't enter. Are we going to want to do that? That's a consideration for us, isn't it? We need to be having conversation about what are we going to do, not just to sanitize our building, but to make people safe as they come in. Not just with a mask, but hand sanitizer. What I've done in the past is I've gone out when we have a situation like this and bought bottles of sanitizer and put them around the church or on the ends of the pews so people could use them. But the recommendation is that you're not passing a bottle of hand sanitizer around. One of the suggestions is that you have somebody, instead of the greeters greeting with a handshake, they give a little squirt of hand sanitizer on the way in and then again on the way out. What about those frequently touched things like door handles? Can you prop the door open? What are those places that people touch frequently or are in that area? We have to be considering those kind of things. Many of us as pastors have been having a conversation about what are we going to do with communion. Most of the time I went out early on in this process and I bought some wafers, and that was my intent, was to be able to use wafers. But boy, that's even going to be questionable now. And so the suggestion was made, well, buy a bunch of those little prepackaged where the juice and the wafers on the top and it's all together. Nobody else has to touch it. Well, you have to distribute them. And then many people struggle to get them open. What's the answer? There's no easy answer. But it's one we have to be talking about now. We have to be talking about how are we going to help people feel safe. It's going to mean we have to have conversations about what are we going to do if we're going to sing or not. Are we going to have hymnals? The recommendation is no hymnals, no bulletins, nothing permanent. Can we do that electronically with most of our people? How can we address those issues effectively? There's many things we have to be having conversation about. How far does the pastor need to be away from the congregation to preach? Normally, if you were to come into the sanctuary on a Sunday morning, you'd find me down here on the floor in the middle of these first few pews. But that won't be possible. I'll not only have a mask on, but I'll need to remain up on the platform. And so we have to consider who else is on that platform so that we can maintain distance. And because our voices project, we have to maintain even further of a distance and make sure people are not walking through those areas. We are working to make our buildings as safe as possible for you to return to. We want you to believe that we've thought about you before we're together again. Can we guarantee you are safe? No. But that's always true. We can't guarantee your safety. But we do want you to feel that we have thought about you and done all we can so that we can travel both your spiritual and health journey with you as safely as possible. I want us today to be thinking about who's in the pew. Who's in our church? Who's part of the church? The church is made up of high-risk folks. There's no doubt about that. There's those of us that are high risk because of age or health concerns or for some other reason. But our churches are full of business owners, teachers, those that were unemployed before this even all started. We have a lot of healthcare workers of all different kinds that are a part of our churches. We have students. And also, we cannot forget that in our churches, we have those that are struggling with addiction, mental health, relationship and financial issues. We're all really the same in so many ways. What we in the church are having conversation about as leaders and preparing for the church to begin to gather again is how can we do that and fulfill God's commandment, first of all, to love God with all of our heart, our mind, and soul. But then, just as importantly, how can we love our neighbor as ourselves? And so that's what we, as leaders in the church, are having conversation about now. How can we make everybody that we possibly can know that we're thinking about them, care about them, love them as we love ourselves, and looking forward to that day when we can gather again as the church. That's our goal today.